Hi, I'm Erica Jackman from Kitchen Table Quilting, and today we're going to be making one of my favorite patterns, the violet quilt, using a custom bundle of fabrics from Kaffe Fassett. So to make this quilt, we're going to use this custom bundle of Kaffe fabrics, and you'll also need to have 2 1/4 yards of background fabric, 3 2/3 yards of backing fabric, and 1/2 yard of binding fabric. Well, the only other things you'll need are a rotary cutter and a ruler. This is a really fun quilt pattern to make because it's a lot easier to make than it looks like. It's actually made of a few larger blocks, and the rest of the blocks are made from sashing. There are 3 types of blocks in the lap quilt. The first one is a corner block, and it will go right here in the quilt. And we have a side block, which will go here in the quilt. And then the last block will be the main block, which will go here in the quilt. We'll start by making the main block. Each of the blocks has the same shape in the corner. Let's make one of these together. I'm going to start by sewing these 2 pieces together. And it's a pretty short seam, so I'm not going to pin it, but you can if you want to. These are 2 1/2 inch blocks, and I'm just going to sew them together using a 1/4 inch seam allowance. Now I'm going to press the seam. I like to press my seams open. Now we're going to sew this 2 1/2 by 4 1/2 inch background piece to the top. I'm going to pin at the beginning, at the end, and then I'm going to put 1 pin in the middle. Now I'm going to press the seam. This is the block that we'll have on the corner of each of our 3 types of blocks. And for each of the main blocks, you're going to need 2 of them. So for each block, you'll need to make 2 rows that look like this. One that will go on the top, one that will go on the bottom, and then 1 row that looks like this. Let's sew this top row together. I'm going to sew these 2 together. Pin at the beginning. I like to pin at the end, and then 1 in the middle. Let's press this open. Now we're going to attach the other piece. Pin the same way, 1 pin at the beginning, 1 pin at the end, and 1 in the middle. Now I'm going to press my seam. Give it a nice press. Okay, this will be the top and also the bottom row of these blocks. So you need 2 for each one, and then you'll sew these 3 squares together in just the same way. These are 4.5 inch squares in the pattern. Here's an example of what these will look like when they're done. The next step is to sew the rows together to make your block, and it will look just like this. We'll need to make 4 of these for the lap size quilt. Now we're going to add sashing to the top and the bottom of the block. You'll add 2 2.5 inch by 12.5 inch pieces, 1 to the top and 1 to the bottom. And then we'll add 2 2.5 inch by 16.5 pieces to the side. And those will make our main blocks for the quilt. And for the lap size, you will need 4 of them. Now that you've made your 4 main blocks, we're going to move on to making the corner blocks. They are made in a very similar way, but they're a little smaller, and you'll need to make 2 of these for your quilt. So you'll use 3 of the 4.5 inch squares plus 1 of these starting pieces, and then you'll add sashing to the top and 1 of the sides. And then you'll need to make the side blocks, and you'll need 6 of these. They're made in a very similar way. You just use 4 of the 4.5 inch squares and then 2 of the starting pieces, and then add your sashing to 2 of the sides and to the top, and that will make all of your blocks. Now we're going to move on to making the sashing, which is a little bit tricky but not difficult to do. We have all of our blocks done, so now we're going to talk about the layout of the quilt. So if you remember, we have our main block pieces, and you can see those blocks in the quilt have an outline of white background fabric. We're going to have our corner pieces, and there's only 2 of them, and they'll be on the right side because the layout of the quilt is not symmetrical. So you'll have 1 at the top and 1 at the bottom on the right side. And then we're going to have our side pieces, which will go over here on the sides, and then you rotate them for this side of the quilt. So once you have all of those, if you refer to the layout section of the pattern, it will show the blocks in a darker outline so you can see where they go, because we're going to add sashing in between the blocks. So in each row there will be a line of vertical sashing that goes between. So here is a block, and here is a block, and right in between right here there is a sashing piece which has 1 4.5 inch square, a 2.5 by 4.5 inch background piece, and then 1 more background piece and 2 more squares. This vertical sashing piece is going to go between your blocks to make your rows, and then between the rows we're going to have a long horizontal sashing piece that's going to be made up of squares and the 2.5 by 4.5 inch background pieces. Now there are 2 options when making your quilt. You can make it scrappy or you can make it as written like it says in the pattern. So fabric C refers to these squares, and if you're making it as written, these fabrics will all be the same for each of these squares. If you're making it scrappy, you'll use leftovers from your plus shapes to make these fabric C squares. So after you've sewn your rows together, all you need to do is add your border. It's a 2.5 inch border that goes around the entire quilt, and the quilt will end up as 58 inches by 68 inches. It comes together really quickly. I highly recommend that you lay everything out before you start sewing everything together, because it's important to see visually how all the blocks are going to fit together before you start sewing. Thanks for joining me today in making the violet quilt pattern. This is one of my favorite patterns to make, and I can't wait to see what you do with it. If you'd like to see more of my work, you can find me on Instagram at Kitchen Table Quilting or visit my website, kitchentablequilting.com. Happy sewing!